All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's live stream. I've got an awesome guest, Ray Walker, tonight with me from Saint Cloud Bourbon. Been really looking forward to talking with him, drinking some of his whiskey, getting to know a little bit more about him, the brand, what's kind of coming down the pipe a little bit. So, with that being said, Ray, welcome to tonight's live stream. Appreciate you joining me, bud.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to sitting with you, and talking about some of the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for taking some time. So, and thanks for everybody for jumping in tonight. I'm really looking forward to this live stream. So we'll kind of get going with some things, and I've got just some general questions for Ray, and then we're just going to have fun. So we'll pay attention to the chat a little bit and see what people kind of fire at us. So with that being said, so I guess what I kind of want to do is, if you don't mind, why don't you share a little bit with everybody, a little bit about yourself and kind of your background a little bit?
I can do that. First thing I was gonna say was, how's my audio? Because I have a window open.
Perfect.
All right, good.
Perfect.
So I guess the first thing to get into about what St. Cloud is and what we do and what we're trying to do. It's a very um, small house that we make our bourbon with. We don't go out and just buy bulk bourbon from folks. We specifically go out with an idea with the kind of bourbon that we'd like to end up with, and we work with people that can help get us to that point. Because we don't have a distillery ourselves, what that means is we have to work with people that do have distilleries. And thankfully, I can go from drinking all the bourbon that I have and being around people that know what they're doing as well. I can go to those people and express what I'd like to happen as far as the production of the bourbon, what the mash bill is going to be, and to be able to use my barrels that I wish to use. Now that allows us to have a level of control that a lot of people don't have the ability to do. And for us, it's really important for us to be able to stay small so we can keep that kind of control. So I guess the first introduction that people would have to St. Cloud would be, seeing the bottle and, not knowing what's inside of it, having, a guess from hearing what other people are saying about it. But the take home point is that St. Cloud is always moving towards a moving target that is going to be adjusted based on what my preferences are, what the client's preferences are, and just trying to be an innovator in the space.
So with that being said, so kind of with the bourbon boom that we're in right now, for you and everybody involved with St. Cloud, what was the process like for starting everything and kind of just figuring out like where we need to kind of go to get barrels to kind of do what it was that you as your brand kind of really wanted to do?
Well, I think it's one of those things where we had an idea about where we wanted to take the bourbon beyond just a nice looking bottle. We had to figure out what we wanted the bourbon to represent, not just with the first couple of batches, but to be able to have a long-term vision and to understand the steps to get there. And so a lot of that was just taking a piece of scratch paper and jotting down some of the things that we wanted, some of the things that we knew we wouldn't want to have. And so when you do that, you you almost paint yourself into a corner, which isn't really a bad thing. But if you say that I want very authentic, very pure bourbon, you can't then have a whole bunch of funny business going on behind the scenes. You can't have all these different types of barrel programs that you're going into where you're going to have a bourbon that stands out for being odd rather than good. You can't have it as an interest of yours to say that I want an elegant mouthfeel or something like that, and then you're filtering the hell out of it, and you're doing things that are going to affect not just mouthfeel but the aromas and all those different things. So it seems like making one decision leads to many others that kind of right themselves. And so looking at the partners that we're able to find using Google and other things like that, seeing what other people were doing and trying their bourbons, seeing what things we did like, seeing things that we didn't like, but then also trying to find a way to make it our own. Those were things that were very important to us.
How so I guess with that being said, how many people roughly did you have kind of in play to get to the point where what you finally released into the bottle was kind of the who were really the players, not necessarily by name, but how many people kind of were there to get to an idea of like, hey, this is really what I think we all want and what the public is going to want?
Yeah, well, conceptually, just one person, me, as far as what I wanted. And then I had one partner that I was, shooting ideas off of and, saying, does this sound crazy? Or, does this make sense? And, a lot of that isn't necessarily bourbon wise. It's kind of human nature wise, marketing wise, logistics wise, all those different things, and just shooting off these ideas, and just making sure that sometimes you feel like you have a great idea, and to be left to your own strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes you can have a great idea and you're reinforced by doing it by yourself, and other times you have a bad idea and nobody's there to call you out on your bad idea. So just to be able to have that other person to keep me in check was really important on the conceptual side of things. But then on the actual side of implementation of getting everything done with the bourbon, we had one distillery partner, and the other people that touched the bourbon, I guess you could say 3 other people, 3 actual employees. But yeah, again, all the decisions were my own, were based on what I wanted the bourbon to be, how I wanted it to be aged, how long I wanted it to be aged. And then once the bottling was going to happen, what that looked like, if we were going to proof down, if it was going to be cask strength or what have you. Those were my decisions alone.
Now, let's kind of take a step back. So with that being said, so I think that gives everybody a good idea of what it was that you wanted with the bourbon. But I think knowing a little bit of your kind of background, why don't you share with everybody a little bit of like your background? You come from a wine background, and your palate, to kind of I think that'll give everybody a good idea that this isn't just like someone like me coming in off the street and deciding, hey, this is what I want. You come from already there being a background of, tasting and nosing and all of that. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit of that with everybody.
Sure. My background before was finance. And from there, I went on to make Grand Cru wines in the wine region of Burgundy in France. And in that position, what I did was I purchased grapes and I made the wines myself. At times I would be able to have volunteers come in, help sort fruit and crush fruit and all that different stuff. But it was a very simple process. And it wasn't, the winemaking wasn't based on me having a special palate or a special skill or anything like that. It was just based on having this idea, this principle that I was going to take the best fruit that I could possibly get my hands on, and to do everything that I could to treat that fruit the same as the fruit that came from other vineyards. So to respect minimalism, to respect quality, and to do everything as I could, as simply as I could. And so I think with bourbon, there is a lot of connection to that. There's a lot of crossover. Whenever you're using a barrel to mature an alcoholic beverage, I think that there's a lot of crossover that can be had in between these different beverages. But I've always made the point that I don't have some kind of a special palate. I'm just very precise in what I'm trying to do myself, to allow whatever I'm working with to have enough space to express itself. Of course, in bourbon, you have to do more things as far as choosing the barrel. It has much more of an influence on what I'm doing with Saint Cloud than when I was making wine in France, because I wanted the fruit to speak for itself when it came to making wine. Whereas in bourbon, I want the French oak to underscore the spirit that's aging. But the principle is exactly the same. I want to be able to have the oak be something that supports instead of dominates the experience. And I want there to be a unique experience for whoever's drinking it or sharing it, or whatever they're doing with it. I want them to come away from the experience thinking that this is something that was unique that I couldn't have had with another distillery that albeit could have been great, but it's just different, and that's what we strive for, is to be different.
Yeah, and I thought that was, I like the idea of learning your background, like prior to knowing about the bourbon, was knowing kind of where you came from first and what was involved there, and then kind of introducing yourself to bourbon. I guess also with that, so from wine to bourbon or whiskey, like, why that transition? What was it that kind of took you a little bit out of the wine world and kind of thrust you into maybe wanting to kind of go down the bourbon road, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that I don't really share with others when they're asking this question, and I guess it never occurred to me until now. But winemakers, we have this phrase, it takes a lot of beer to make good wine, because you're constantly drinking, you're trying to stay hydrated or refreshed. You're trying to break from the monotony of making wine and only drinking wine. So you like to drink other things, like a cognac, like a champagne, like a different things, just to keep it going, and to be interesting and continue that excitement for other beverages. And so for me, I've always enjoyed bourbon, and that's because a buddy of mine, Sean Reed, in fact, was this guy who we drank a lot of wine together. And when we were hanging out one time, he gave me a Pappy's 20, and so we're drinking from that, and he's telling me about bourbon, and kind of got excited about it. And my father's family, going back over 200 years, is from Kentucky. Marion, Kentucky, in fact, which is unfortunately it's in the dry county, Crittenden County. Or else we would have had headquarters there. But the thing is, like, when I would drink bourbon, I had this sense of pride, that I wasn't that excited about Californian wine before, and I loved being a Californian and that kind of thing, but I didn't really feel the lineage to the beverage as I did with bourbon. And so when I was in France, I always had this idea that if I could go back to the U.S. and make something, I would like to do a Kentucky bourbon. And because my father's family on that side, their lineage goes back to UK, Ireland. And I figured it would be cool if I was making French wine at the time, doing a Kentucky bourbon and an Irish whiskey. I thought that would be like the coolest thing. And that was always like this kind of idea that I had. And so when I came back to America, the first thing I wanted to do was just exercise that that fantasy and just see what could happen.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I that's the one thing I always like, and you kind of get these like little kind of backstory or the history of how people end up like where they are. And I thought, just in talking to you briefly prior to this and just learning a little bit more, was I figured that just that wine background and just everything that went into that was going to not only influence that, but really prepare you to put out a product that's going to be, I don't want to say necessarily different or unique, but the one thing I would say, like Jason from the Mash and Drum put in the comment, was that French oak. And I know, I think specifically, are they actually limousine barrels? Is it?
Yeah, from the Limousin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know just from around here, there's a smaller distillery by us where they age all of their rye in those barrels. And it really offers a different and unique, flavor profile. And it's something different. So that's one thing that I figured that if there was anything you were going to do, it would be maybe kind of push the envelope a little bit and just kind of use not necessarily different techniques, because I mean, really, honestly, with bourbon, I mean, really, it's made kind of two ways, either through column, well, maybe three, column, hybrid, or a pot still, and you get some different unique flavors from column versus pot still. But I think for you, understanding kind of the world of like the oak barrel and what that does to wine, that's going to really influence your bourbon, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about my background as it relates to St. Cloud and bourbon or whiskeys at large is that I was so worried about oak influence when it came to wine that I would always use used oak, hoping that I would have the least character as possible coming from this oak influence. And so now with bourbon, I see the benefit of it, and I see that it's, it was a tool for that other people have employed when it comes to wine. So I can't say that it's not a tool in wine and it's a tool in bourbon. But for me personally, in my journey, seeing bourbon or seeing oak as a tool that I'm going to be using as a flavor addition, or using some of the attributes that can come from different types of oaks, that can come from mouthfeel or aromatic or, the flavor. These are things that I really try to dismiss and take out of the equation before, and now I'm really using it. So I think what people should see from me being a winemaker, as my background, one of the things that I'm excited about is being able to use different ingredients as far as where my barley comes from, where my wheat comes from, for future bottlings, and the different types of corn, so all these things make a difference. And commonly, and this is changing, but commonly these ingredients are spoken about very generically. Maybe you might hear about what ingredients are going into the mash bill, but you're not really hearing about where those ingredients are coming from. And I think that that's very important, because every piece of land gives something different to its produce. So for me, I'm looking at those kinds of details and paying attention to how that's going to affect the final bourbon. And that's why we're very happy that people are excited about, our packaging, and, they're glad that the bourbon inside actually lives up to it and all that stuff. But this is really just kind of the precursor to, what we really have in store. The full rollout hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's one thing I want to kind of get into here in a little bit, is just kind of, what you've got going on with the brand and like where you see it going. But let me kind of back up with one thing. So with all the different like grains and all of that, I'm assuming you probably believe, or feel strongly about like the terroir of like regions and like where things are and what the influence of different things are.
Well, it would be like asking you if you're a believer of water. It's just, it's there. You have to believe in it. It's a constant. It's scientifically, not just proven. It can't be disproven. Things taste differently from where they come from, just the same as if you lived in New York, for 20 years, you would sound like you've lived in New York for 20 years. And I sound painfully like I'm from California, and these things we can't shake, and I think that there's a major benefit to that. And the only shortcoming we could have is to be not just mediocre, but to be, an experience that people forget about. We want people to know what our bourbon tastes like and to experience that and not be able to say this tastes exactly like something else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, so yeah, thanks for all that information. I guess why don't we, if you don't mind, why don't we just get into some of the whiskey and kind of talk a little bit about that and the brand, I guess. So here's a little bit of the information that I know with it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I just kind of took some notes. So on the bottle, I believe it even says like under 4 years. So that could be, whatever, a day shy of 4 years. So, that's fine. And I don't even really consider that necessarily a young whiskey. I mean, when you're into 1, maybe 2 year, that's kind of young. When you're approaching 4 or 5, I mean, that's not really young, considering I always thought, well, people at times will say a 4-year whiskey is young, but the flip side of that is that there's a special category, bottled and bond, that's gonna be 4 years. So, I mean, for it to necessarily be considered young or bad, I think a lot of people kind of lose sight of, like, getting too involved or wrapped up in the age, even though it's nice to have something with a little bit of age, but I don't consider this, young by any means. So
bottled and bond would be
so it's coming in
longer than 4 years, right? I think
yeah,
yeah. But no,
4 years, right?
Yeah. Can I just say something real quick about that?
Sure. Yeah.
So it's one of these things where I think if you look at the history of how bourbon's been sold and produced and marketed to people, there's a lot of interesting stories about people having surpluses of bourbon and they just sat on them in these difficult times to move bourbon. And so these long maturation periods were looked at as sought after things that really did a lot of great things to bourbon, and consumers ate that up because it's the marketing machine behind that was able to tell people, hey, my bourbon's been in there for 15 years, mine's in there for 17 years, and you basically have a pissing contest about who's had this bourbon in there longer. And when you look at these people that are master distillers that have made incredible bourbons, and you get down to the cool factor of the water that can add so much to bourbon, being from Kentucky and all these different things, right? And which barrel and all these other things. Well, there's all these benefits that can happen from the distiller, making a killer distillate right off top, even before it goes into the barrel, to great places that it's going to be aging. And you're looking at the temperature and the humidity and the diurnal temperature fluctuations that you're going to have in that storing facility that can make a great bourbon. But the thing is, if you just look at it and just say, I'm going to look at the age of the bourbon, that's being too simplistic when it comes to the spirit. And it really makes it look like it's a dumbed down product when there's a lot of intricacy that goes into the distillation process, the aging, all these different things. And not just the aging, but when and how you choose to bottle it and by what methods and which technologies you employ. There's so many different interesting aspects to it that when people look at it and they say, oh, this is a young bourbon, or I prefer something that's like 8 years old. And it's like, how can you know? It's going to be different based on how it's been aged. It's going to be different based on the original distillate, the entry proof. If you've watered down, if you've filtered, all these things are making a big difference. And I would want people to take more of a in-depth look as far as how their bourbon's being created, matured, and bottled as well. All these different aspects, because they make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Right. So that was
I agree because I think that's like you hit the nail on the head, because so many times so many people get so fixated on just the pure age, but without knowing all of like what you just kind of explained, you can't just discredit a whiskey because of age. And I really feel like with this, like with your bourbon specifically, with it being on, let's just say, the younger side, it's not 8, 9, 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of flavor. It really imparts a lot of what I think a lot of people who enjoy whiskey really want. It's got a really nice proof. It's non-chill filtered. It's got a lot of these things that it's bold. It's got a good mouthfeel. So, I think just in general, if you didn't tell anybody just, what the age of this was, my guess is that this would trick an awful lot of people. And I don't mean trick like in a bad way, like you're trying to be sneaky with it, not being,
Right.
6, 8, 10 years old. But I don't think a lot of people would truly understand like the age of this. But if they knew a little bit more about what you just kind of explained, they'd understand exactly what it is you're looking for in your bourbon and why it tastes like this.
Right. And that's one of the things that, when people taste batch one, for example, I've been very transparent that we have one barrel that we still have aging. And I never think that I have all the answers or anything like that. Saint Cloud is, it's kind of like an experimentation brand. It's for me to be excited and for me to go after what makes me feel like I'm following my passion, And so with that, you can't go into it thinking, oh, I have all the answers, right? But when people taste batch one, a lot of people say, oh, it tastes wonderful. This will be great in 2 years or, whatever. And it's like, well, some of those things that you like are going to go away in 2 years. Some of the things that you imagine to be there might happen, or they might happen in a different way from how you're assuming they might be. But the thing is that, you pay for everything, right? With time, you're going to have better aromatics to some and worse aromatics to others, because you're losing some of the fruity, the fruity expression that you have, the aromatics that you're normally feeling, and those are going to be going towards darker tones. It's going to be like more caramel, chocolate, and deeper notes instead of being citrus and stone fruit and all that. So a lot of that high toned kind of fruity tone that you get in the Saint Cloud, that is going to be either covered up, muted, or taken away by whatever that barrel is after 2 more years or 3 more years, or who knows how long. But you don't add more of everything, and it's just to the net benefit. Instead, I've often said the same thing when it comes to wine. Some people feel like if you add red and if you add blue and if you add yellow and you add green, you're going to have in the end this rainbow, and it's going to be beautiful, and you're going to have all the best parts of it. But instead, what you end up with is brown. It's just mud. Everything's together, and nothing can actually stick out as a unique part because everything's just pushed towards the middle. And with Saint Cloud, we wanted it to stick out, to be something that's unique, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of cool. That's one thing I always kind of appreciate with smaller brands is the ability to, I don't want to say necessarily like adjust the fly, but as you begin to release different batches and either your whiskey ages or whatever it may be, you can start to kind of pick and choose some different things. You know, it's not like your Jim Beam where everything tastes like white label or whatever it is. You start to kind of let the barrels and the time do the work. And then when you decide that it's ready and that's something that's different and unique, you bottle it and give it to everybody as something different.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the strengths of being small and just starting out and people not knowing what the hell your brand is about, you know. And we're not trying to make any statements. We're not trying to, you know, kill the competition or anything like that. We want people to taste Saint Cloud and say, damn, that was different. That was good. It doesn't have to beat the pants off of anybody. It doesn't have to be the best for X amount of money or anything like that. We're not shooting for any of those positions. But what we do want is when somebody opens up a bottle of Saint Cloud, they say that was unique, and hopefully they enjoyed it. You know, because otherwise there's a lot of people that are playing in the middle, and I think just like when you meet people, the worst thing you can do after meeting somebody is just forget them. You know, it's better to have an opinion, you know, good, bad, or, you know, whichever way, but you want to be able to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, with a lot of the guys that are in the chat right now, a couple of them have their own whiskey review channels as well. And there's some other people that we know in here. And a lot of guys who've got a lot of experience with whiskey. And a lot of the guys that are in here right now, we've all tried it. We've all talked about it. And I think we all, for the most part, really enjoy it. I think if we kind of get into the whiskey a little bit, it's really, I think, what a lot of us enjoy. It's a bold, full flavored, kind of a little bit of the sweet and peppery, you know, things that are there in a bourbon. And for me specifically, that's one thing I really like. I like when you start to get different flavors that develop, not just when you put it in your mouth and you just get one flavor of something, that it starts to kind of evolve as the finish develops and all that. And for me, I mean, I really, really enjoy the whiskey. So I guess, you know, with that, do you want to kind of just share with everybody a little bit about it, like what it is and the proof? And I don't know if you want to get into mash bills or you can or anything like that, but that's fine. That's fine. And that's fine. I know you probably get asked a million times, and that's fine. But
a million and four.
I guess
no. I would like to say that, you know, first and foremost, it's like it's a very classic mash bill. I don't think that me naming the mash bill would stop, you know, any people from, you know, trying to speculate on if that's the truth or not, you know, if there's some hidden, you know, aspect to it. But it's a very classic mash bill, but we just don't like sharing it. It's just one of those things where, I don't know, I like keeping some things close to the vest, you know? And
that's understandable.
Yeah. And, you know, part of that, well, I'd say, you know, the majority of that isn't even the NDAs and things like that. It's not wanting to put our bourbon out there so people can, you know, then put other bourbons next to it and try to say, this is what it should taste like. St. Cloud has this mash bill, so this one has a similar mash bill. You know what I mean? And we don't want it to be something to where people are putting this experience of St. Cloud next to someone else and comparing that. We kind of feel like it cheapens it. That's a big part of it. But yeah, it was aged in Limousin oak, French oak. It was aged for about 3.25 years. And It was a fairly low entry proof point into the barrel. And
which is important, I guess. With that being said, can you like with that? I'm glad you said that. Can you elaborate a little bit on it going in at a lower, entry proof?
yeah, so I will say I made a lot of assumptions with my decisions, and what I noticed when I had barrels in France when I was making wine, I would have Dusty Dan saying, "Hey, hello." Um, so
Yep.
I will say that what I noticed when you have these barrels, if you fill them up, prior to usage, and you fill them up with hot water, and you soak them, say 2 or 3 days, and then you're supposed to dump them out. If you do it with hot water versus cold, you end up having a lot more of these oils, from the oak, leach into the water that's being used to fill into the barrel. And also you get a lot more color, and you can taste it. It's like oak water. And so I noticed that, while making wine. So that's kind of why, or how I was able to make that connection, that a higher proof for the entry point, the entry proof was that could leach out a lot more from the barrel, and not necessarily some of the things that I liked. I figured some of the initial oils, some of the aspects that were just tasting outright oaky, those kind of things would just be a shock to the bourbon right when you filled it up. And so I figured if you had a lower proof, it would be pulling off much less of that. It's going to happen over time, but I figure anything that happens to a beverage, especially an alcoholic beverage, if that can happen on a slower scale instead of an immediate bang, then it's going to potentially taste a lot more refined. It's going to taste a lot more balanced, rather than you have this big dollop of oak just riding on top of this bourbon. And I'm not saying any names, but you can definitely get that on some of these bourbons that you taste, that it feels like you got the spirit, and then you have the bourbon, just riding on top. And I think that to be able to have oak that's more, I guess, more integrated into the bourbon itself, I think that if you have a lower proof that you're starting out with, that it just kind of happens much more seamlessly than if you were to just scare the hell out of the bourbon with all this oak.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of that is the higher, generally the higher you go in, the more water in the end you can cut it and produce more product as well. So, by going a little bit lower and having more of a, I guess the closest thing to a lower entry proof bourbon, I would call that more of like the tighter something is, the more refined it is and more flavor it has. And I think that's where a little bit more of a trend has kind of started to lean, I think, towards the lower entry proof, just because there's a lot of whiskey people out there who want a quality, product, regardless of all the other ages and where it's from or who produces it. A lot of people really understand what that is. And you're not necessarily, and I guess maybe I shouldn't say this, but I don't think you're trying to produce whiskey for somebody who's just entering the whiskey world. I think a lot of people who are getting a hold of your whiskey are for people who I mean, kind of know what they're going to be kind of up against, so to speak. And maybe I'm wrong.
I think so. Here's the thing. You make a very good point, because when I had the decision to water back or water down the bourbon, I did not to, just because I wanted to put the control in the consumer's hands. I figured if somebody wanted to make a cocktail out of it, they can do that. They're going to do it no matter what I do, right? If they wanted to add drops of water to it, or if they wanted to add small ice cubes or big ice cubes, if they wanted to chill the bottle prior to serving, that's something I couldn't control. But I wanted to give people the ability to do whatever they were going to do. And so I wanted to make the what arrived in bottle, I wanted that to be as close as you would get if you were doing a tasting straight out of the barrel. And so whatever came from that, then that would be good. But it's interesting. I've had a lot of people say that they've had relatives come over their house and they've been attracted to the bottle and they've wanted to try it, and they've really enjoyed the bourbon because of how smooth it is, and they've been surprised that they can drink something that's 120 proof. So
and it really is. I mean, it's fantastic, and I would say of drinking a lot of higher proof, bourbons, it definitely does not drink like 120 proof. You may catch it right on that very first sip, but again, I mean, that's 120 proof, and it's to shock your palate. But that second, third sip and beyond that is like what you just described, where it really gets smooth and it's full of flavor. And I guess to your point before, if somebody feels it's a little bit much, then add some water, an ice cube, proof it down a little bit and make it how you like it. So that was probably unfair to say it's just like a pro's drinking whiskey. I mean, you can always proof something down to make it to your liking. So
yeah, I mean, I would rather people look at it as something that they don't want to mess with, that they would just drink as it came, because there's a lot texturally that changes if you chill it down. If you add an ice cube, what kind of ice cube, where's the water come from, all these different things, they make a big impact on the type of experience you're going to have. I mean, at the end of the day, I am a businessman, and I do want people, to enjoy it and for people to drink more of it. But there's a reason that we haven't, up until this point, posted any pictures of cocktails and different things like that for our bourbon. We would prefer for people to taste it as it comes. But I've had close family members and people I meet that say, hey man, with one ice cube, this is magic. Some people say, hey, with 5 drops of water, and I can't really fault them on that. However you want to enjoy it, then that's fine.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, it's one of those things, drink it how you like it. If you want it higher proof, less proof, whatever it is, from your standpoint, buy it and you do whatever you want with it. So,
right. I mean, that's the
right.
thing.
So Jason,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that, that was you mentioned before, when something's at cast strength at 120 proof, if you were to water down, to say 100 proof, proof down to 90 or something like that, you have a lot more product you can sell, but I think that it would have pissed a lot of people off, or if nothing else, people would have had questions, as far as what the cast strength version of Saint Cloud tasted like if all I offered was 100 proof or 90 proof or something like that. And so I figured, coming out the gate swinging, with barrel proof, this gave people the opportunity to see that, hey, this bourbon, while it's young, it is very smooth. And a big part of the reason why it's smooth is because it has those oils straight off of, just being a distillate that's never been chill filtered, never been, messed around with. And that's a big part of why people like the aromatics in the mouthfeel.
Yeah. I mean, it's pure. I mean, as far as bourbon goes, I mean, this is straight from the barrel and into a bottle. And for me, I know a lot of the guys who are in the chat tonight, I know they appreciate that. And I, by, not stripping all those oils and acids and things like that from the whiskey, it allows you just more flavors to develop, coat your mouth better, the palate, all of that. And that's what allows you to really enjoy, what it was that you wanted people to kind of taste with that. So,
yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this. So Jason from the Mash and Drum, who also has a whiskey review channel, a good one at that. There's a few other guys in here, but he's asked, so what's in store for batch 2? Is it going to be something different? Too.
So batch 2 is going to be very similar to batch 1. It wasn't in my plans to have batch 1 and batch 2 be so similar. I was going to, potentially look at longer times for maturation, or to, finish in a different, in a different kind of a cask, to, just to be able to make it clear that we weren't going to stay stagnant, that we're always going to be moving around. But since the response has been so strong from batch one, I decided to, play the same tune again, so to speak. And, we'll let maybe the main batches will be, something that stays somewhat linear, while we have offshoots of that are a bit more wild and extreme, because we have big plans to be doing things, to be doing distillations ourselves, to be coming up with mash bills that are definitely off the beaten path. And we want to be able to get that out to the consumer. But maybe it makes sense to be able to have two lines of that, the main Saint Cloud, and, to have something that, shoots off from that gives folks, something more of an experimental interpretation, if you will.
Interesting. So that's kind of maybe giving. So I guess is that kind of meaning giving people, I don't want to say a different product. Is that giving people something that's potentially like a little bit of a lower proof, or just something that's still just a little bit different than what your main release will be?
Because I had that assumption as far as the mouthfeel on this first one, and I was right. I'd like to not steer away from that. I'm really worried about having an astringent filling bourbon, one that doesn't have the kind of mouthfeel as batch one. So I don't think I want to mess around with proofing down or anything like that. But when it comes to different mash bills and the different maturation vessels, that's something that we are going to be looking at, doing as the offshoots, because we want to take advantage of all the different things that a bourbon can be, especially a Kentucky bourbon can be. You can have, a Kentucky bourbon be something that, celebrates the different ingredients that are going inside of it, and the different terroirs that can be expressed from the different geological, origins that these ingredients can have, while still staying true to classic bourbon that's honest, that's straightforward, that isn't fancy just for the sake of being fancy. And we don't ever want folks wearing white gloves to drink our bourbon. We know that it's going to be expensive to make. It's probably going to get a whole lot more expensive to make in the package, but we want something unique for people, and that is number one. We don't want for somebody to drink Saint Cloud and to say, oh, this is like somebody else's. And I don't think at this point that somebody can compare it that easily with anything else that's on the market.
Yeah, it really is a a fantastic bourbon. I mean, I'm drinking some of it right now. Hopefully you are as well. I mean, I
ran out. I was gonna try to get some more.
I mean, it's for me, I mean, it's just nice and full bodied. And I really, as this thing has kind of opened up a little bit for me,
mm-hmm.
I start to pull out like just different layers, that nice sweet oak flavor, still some of those vanillas and caramels. But the one thing that really started in kind of some of those dark fruits, but one of the things that kind of started to jump out at me a little bit was this like chocolate or espresso type of note. And it's really, really nice. I like how it's just kind of developed over the time while we've been doing this show. Is really, I guess I'll say kudos to you for really, putting out a really quality, product, like this. So it's really, really fantastic bourbon.
Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoy it. And because I did not distill it with my own hands, I can't take all this credit, but I did make the decisions, but I definitely, I'm so glad anytime somebody enjoys it, and I'm glad that you are enjoying it. And we just want more of that. We want to give people more of those unique experiences, and to be able to share that with everybody else, because it's special. You have all those really nice bourbons behind you, and to be on this live stream with you, and have your interest and have other people, and not everybody's positive, of course, but just to be able to step in and have some people, a lot of people really, excited about what you're doing, curious about what you're doing, and, getting off from work and all that stuff. And, they pour a bottle of Saint Cloud. And I mean, that feels, amazing, to be able to have that kind of support. And, it's just really special.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys, and a few of them I've met in person, like in the chat, and I think a lot of us would have no problems sharing a few nice pours of this, with each other. I mean, this is one of those. This is, to me, is like what I call like a conversation bourbon. This is one of those ones that you can sit down with for a while and sip on, and you just know that it's quality and good, and it just allows you to kind of shoot the shit and talk to people, and you're not constantly having to like sip it just to kind of create the flavor. It just lingers there. So for me, I mean, this is what I consider like a conversation bourbon. So it's there's not much else I can say. I mean, I really enjoy it, and I'm excited to watch like what you do and kind of where the brand goes and all of that. So I'm really excited for all of that. So
thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we kind of talked a little bit earlier about doing a small like little giveaway. So I know we talked about maybe putting together a question. So do you have a little bit of a question that you can ask, and we'll monitor and see in the chat who answers it first, and I'll let you tell everybody kind of what the like little prize will be tonight.
Let me see. All right, so if somebody gets this right, whoever gets it right, they'll be able to get a Saint Cloud t-shirt. They can choose whatever size that they want, as long as we have it. And these shirts are ready to go, so they would be shipped out this week. And so basically the question is, what year did Kentucky become a state?
And I'll monitor this on my phone, because I know my phone's a little bit more ahead. So, and if you see it in the chat, let me know if you see it or who you see it first, and that's who we'll declare as the winner.
I gotta silence my phone. Hold on. Not seeing anything yet, are you?
Yeah. So I think on my end I show Brent from Oak and Smoke Whiskey Reviews as 1792.
Yeah. Actually, I think June. It's June 1792.
Yeah. So I show on my end that it was that that Brent from Oak and Smoke Whiskey Reviews, who by the way was nice enough to, prior to me doing the live stream, I was scrambling to try to get a bottle of this. So he sent me a sample from his own bottle so that I could do it. So I had some of this stuff to drink along with you. And then he fortunately ran into a bottle or two. Actually, I think it was three. And he was nice enough to send me one and another one to somebody else. So thanks to Brent from Oak and Smoke Whiskey Reviews for doing that. So yeah, I'll let. Should we have? I'll just have maybe Brent like send you a direct message or something on Instagram if that works.
Yeah, and that's at Saint Cloud Bourbon. I do have to say, this is my first time using this platform, and I'm just now seeing the live comments. I didn't know to click that. So I wanted to,
Oh,
say, yeah. So I was gonna say thank
yeah. Sorry.
yeah, thank you for all the cool things, people have been, saying, really cool stuff. I think that's amazing. I'm glad I didn't see it because I would have gotten nervous if I saw these people saying all this
Yeah.
really nice stuff.
No. So I've been watching it. There's a lot of other people who've been kind of paying attention. So everybody's been really good. So actually, my dad, Gary Page, is in here. He's got a good question. It says, so what's the distribution of I know batch one is basically gone. Will batch two, will the distribution of that be similar, or will it be, out a little bit more, or kind of how's that looking for you?
So it's this funny thing, the idea for batch one was supposed to be like, okay, well, I figured in California and New York, people would be more prone to try something that was new, that wasn't, very, very traditionally packaged and all that kind of stuff. So I figured, just wait a couple of years and we'd get into Kentucky and Tennessee. The way it worked out, we signed up with Heidelberg over in Kentucky, and we signed up with some guys over in Tennessee. And just with those two states and with our online presence for our online boutique, we're able to sell out within 3 months. So what we've done in the meantime is we've added Louisiana as well as Georgia. So we're going to be getting those as well, so we can hopefully, shift some stuff, around, so more people can try it. But it's funny. A lot of these states where I got family members, and I love the state. I don't have distribution yet because we've sold out too quickly. So I can't really give people samples when we don't have any to show. In fact, kind of embarrassed. I just drank the last bit of my Saint Cloud that I have while I'm talking to you, because the rest of it is just art bottles in a demo bottle, that doesn't really have labels on it and that kind of thing. But it's like I don't even have any for myself. So yeah, we want to
That's such a crazy thing to hear. It's so crazy. Like like we're all talking and chatting with like the person responsible for what we're drinking, and you don't even have any, for crying out loud, So it's
you got.
I mean, I guess it's a good thing, Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing. The flip side is you've got 1,000 bottles of your $3,000 or your 3,000 bottles, in your at your house. So I mean, it's good that you don't have any. So so let me go back to batch two real quick. Is there any kind of time frame or launch date that you're kind of looking for, kind of releasing batch two?
Yeah, we're looking at bottling at the end of November, most likely early December. The thing is that our bottles come from France. The paper for our labels come from the south of France. We have all of our metallic pieces coming from where is that? I'm like drawing a blank. It's like Central America. I'm forgetting exactly where it comes from because I've been drinking, thankfully. But we have stuff coming from all these different countries, and because of that, the timing can be a little bit funny. So I think the last thing we're going to be waiting for is our bottles to come from France. So hopefully that'll come, late November at the latest, so we can bottle December and then, package up and get everything out before Christmas.
Is the so with batch two, is the target for there to be 3,000 or more, or kind of what's that looking like potentially for you?
It's definitely more. It's probably going to be around 5,000 bottles, something like that, maybe 4,500. And I got to figure out what to do with this single barrel from batch one that I kept. So I was going to throw it in some Japanese oak, and just see what happened. Part of me is just curious to see what changed, with a little bit more time in barrel, and just bottle that up as a single barrel. But
yeah,
I don't know. Like right now, I'm just having fun and just enjoying, people, loving what we're doing. I think it's very cool, So I don't know. We're open, but batch 2 is going to be very similar to batch 1. We are getting rid of the vintage tag on the neck, just because it never sat right. It never sat on there correctly, and it's a pain in the butt. They're mainly made out of cotton, so if you're putting them on with by hand, as we do, you have to wear gloves while doing it. Otherwise, even clean hands will leave oil marks on it. So it's just we're getting rid of that.
Are you saying the part that says Saint Cloud or the 2016 tag?
Yeah, it's just a funny shape for how dynamic that part of the bottle is, and so we ship to people, and it would be kind of flagging up a bit, and we were really serious about our packaging and the bourbon, and we don't want things to be looking wrong,
Yeah, and it's a fancy looking bottle, and I mean, really, I'm super happy that I don't just have a fancy bottle and a mediocre whiskey. I mean, I think everything, the packaging, the whiskey, I really truly believe it, when I say, it's a fantastic whiskey. And I think a lot of the guys that are in here will agree. And I'm not just saying that. I don't just say shit or blow smoke or anything like that. If it was something I didn't really enjoy, then I wouldn't be doing this. So, I mean, I believe in the brand, and I'm really, really excited to kind of, see where things are going for you. So, I guess with that being said, so we're a little bit past an hour or so. Is there anything else that you might want to share, or anything you want to tell everybody else, kind of a little bit, whatever you feel like sharing?
I think the main thing is just, my appreciation. I think a lot of times guys don't get to see the owner, express how much, they appreciate it. In some cases, like, Kentucky Owl and things like that, those guys are very, they're out there showing folks how much they appreciate the love and all that. But, it really does mean a whole lot to me, especially, starting over and, coming up with something, just out of my head, and, connecting that back to my family lineage. It just feels very special, very personal. So, I feel like people are, on that path with me, especially with it being such a limited run. It's much more intimate. And the other thing I would say is that I'm happy people love Saint Cloud, but this is just the prelude, really. This is the baseline for what we're going to do. This is the base model and the base bottling that we're going to have. It's going to get a lot more interesting and exciting from here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking some of your time tonight to kind of join me. I'm glad we were able to kind of do this and just get this, get it out there. I mean, I know batch 1 was a limited run, but there was a lot of hype behind everything. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is because I started to hear a lot of people talking a lot of good things about it. And that was one of the things that really interested me, was, to kind of get into it, want to try it, learn a little bit more about you. So, thanks for doing everything. And I'm really looking forward to, to watching, where things go, not only you, but the brand itself. And, so thanks again. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for everybody that, watched this talk and, drank with us. I think that's really cool. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. And I just want to say thanks for everybody for tuning in tonight, and everybody who will watch back on the replay. I think you'll really learn a lot about, and really start to appreciate much more of, what Ray is talking about, the brand, and really what is going into the production of this bourbon. And I've been drinking it throughout the entire live stream, and I've tasted a lot of whiskey, as have a lot of the guys in the chat. And it really is a fantastic whiskey. So with that being said, so thanks to Ray for joining me. tonight. And I guess before I sign off, go check out stcloudbourbon.com. That's it, right? stcloudbourbon.com.
Yeah, and we're at Saint Cloud Bourbon on Instagram.
Yeah, so go check out the website, check them out on Instagram, and you'll see some really incredible things. So thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. And like I say, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers.